Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join SQFI for today's webinar. My name is Sarah Milenich. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at SQFI, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Today's webinar, which is Introducing Edition 8 of the SQF Code, is presented by Leanne Chuboff, who is SQFI's Vice President of Technical Affairs, and our webinar is also sponsored by the 2017 SQF International Conference. Before we get started with the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to go over our webinar protocol. First, I would like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. It will take us a few business days to process the recording, but you should find it both on our YouTube channel and our events page of our website by Tuesday, April 11th. Second, if you have any questions for the speakers during the presentation, please feel free to write them into the chat box that is located on the right-hand side of the screen. I will be copying these over to the presenter as they come in, and they will answer them at the end of the presentation during our Q&A period. Christy Grzwinski is also on the line and will be answering questions as well. Before I introduce Leanne, I'd like to give you an update from today's sponsor, which is the 2017 SQF International Conference. Show of hands here, who does not know about the SQF International Conference? That's a trick question because I cannot see your hands. But for those of you who do not know that we have a conference, the SQF International Conference is our annual big event. It brings together food safety and quality professionals at all levels of the supply chain, including producers, manufacturers, retailers, wholesalers, distributors, consultants, auditors, and service providers to gain knowledge and skills to help them start or improve their food safety and quality program. This year's conference is in Dallas, and it is November 7th through the 9th. In lieu of the annual Retail Food Safety Forum, the SQF Conference will offer a special dedicated retail food safety track where any attendee is welcome to get the latest updates on retail food safety issues, share ideas and best practices with retail food safety peers, and take home practical food safety solutions to implement in any size retail operation. There will also be updates to the new SQF Retail Code. And moving on, this very exciting news that is just being launched and announced today are our keynote speakers for our 2017 conference. First, I would like to introduce and welcome Walter Bond. Walter is a former NCAA and NBA basketball player who will talk about the importance of accepting accountability. Walter was stuck somewhere in the middle until he discovered the proven strategies to become bigger, faster, and stronger so he could break away from the pack. The secret to success exists in habits and rituals that had been part of his upbringing. Walter's father once told him, "Suck it up and get tough." While Walter thought that that was just tough love from a good father, he soon learned that his dad was talking about mental toughness. The type of mental toughness
so I'm going to mute, and you can mute me too. But as long as you keep your Skype up for me.
Yep, I'll do that.
Hello, we have someone on the line that just unmuted their phone line. Can you please make sure that if you've called in that you mute the presentation or you mute your audio? Thank you.
So Walter is going to talk about mental toughness and the type of greatness that allows you to perform at the highest levels of the game. So we're excited about Walter. He's also a host on the Food Network, Show Us Your Business. Next is Charles Duhigg. We're very excited about Charles. He is the best-selling author of The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life, and also Smarter, Better, Faster, The Secrets of Being Productive in Life and Business. Many of the tasks and functions we perform in our everyday lives are habits we formed over time that now require little or no thought or brain power. This happens both in our personal and professional lives. The Power of Habit, award-winning New York Times business reporter Charles Duhigg will take us through the thrilling edge of scientific discoveries that explain why habits exist and how they can be changed. With penetrating intelligence and an ability to distill vast amounts of information into engrossing narratives, Duhigg brings to life a whole new understanding of human nature and its potential for transformation. So we're excited about Charles. And last but not least is William Espy. So food handling, food preparation, and poor employee personal hygiene were all said to contribute to the E. coli outbreaks and neurovirus incident that were tied to Chipotle in 2015. Fears of unsafe food have plagued U.S. consumers as new recalls and illness outbreaks appear with disturbing regularly. William Espy is considered the marketing mastermind behind Chipotle and will discuss his crisis communication strategy regarding the food safety outbreak, and he'll also discuss developing Chipotle's unique brand voice, delivering best practices on branding, value integration, and the power of creating a lasting connection with customers. So we're very excited about all of our speakers. The next slide just tells you what the conference schedule will be. Much like years before, we are going to have training classes a few days before. The next slide, I will show you a tentative listing of training classes we're going to offer. But as you can see from this slide, the conference schedule. And here is a list of the pre-conference training classes that are tentatively in the works for our 2017 conference. And last but not least, we are still accepting proposals for speaking opportunities. So if you would like to submit for a proposal or speak at the conference, please visit. There's a link. We've been sending out email communications about this. I'm sure you've seen it. If not, you can find a link to the proposal portal on SQFI.com/news. It's a news posting in there. There is a hard deadline date for Monday, April 10th, and no extensions will be given. But if you would like to submit something to possibly speak at the conference, I encourage you to do so. And you will be able to begin registering for our conference on April 13th, which is next Thursday. So without further ado, please plan to be at our conference, and I will pass the mic over to Leanne. Before I do, let me just tell you a little bit about Leanne for those of you who do not know her. Leanne has over 25 years of food service experience specializing in supply chain, food safety, and quality assurance. She is currently the Vice President of Technical Affairs at the Safe Quality Food Institute, and she's responsible for the technical elements of the SQF program, which includes the development, maintenance, and technical support of the code and supporting materials. Prior to being with us at SQFI, she worked for the National Restaurant Association as the Director of Science and Regulatory Relations. In this role, she was responsible for the technical accuracy of the Safe Serve Food Safety Program and developed program and services on food safety and food defense to fit with all segments of the restaurant industry. She has also worked for Long John Silver's and Boston Market in corporate quality assurance, where she developed food safety and vendor approval programs. Leanne graduated from Iowa State University with a BS in food science and is active with many organizations, including GFSI, the Conference for Food Protection, and the International Association for Food Protection. She sits on several committees and in an effort to enhance the policy and development programs for industry to help protect public health. Leanne, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Every time I hear my bio read, I'm like, who's that girl? She sounds amazing. So I can't believe all this stuff I've done. Anyways, thank you all for participating. This is a jam-packed webinar. You were one of the few that actually got into this webinar. There was a waiting list. So welcome to everybody who's attending and wants to learn about the new edition, Edition 8. I know you have tons and tons and tons of questions. So as Sarah mentioned, go ahead and chat them in the box, in the chat box, and Christy's going to capture those. She'll chat in what she thinks can just have an immediate response. And some of those questions she's going to capture, and we'll answer them all at the end. So I'm going to go through all the changes. Feel free to keep chatting them in, and then we'll answer them all at the end and just have one big power Q&A. We've allocated like 30 minutes for Q&A. So I know SQF and our stakeholders, and I know you will not be shy in answering and asking questions. So, well, let's begin. There are a lot of things going on, so I don't want to waste too much time. So just to give you a summary of what our goals were with Edition 8. So we had 4 goals. First, we wanted to redesign the Food Safety and Quality Code so it fits the needs of the operation in the industry sector. What we heard all along was the system elements that were designed for manufacturing didn't work for primary, didn't work for manufacturer of food packaging, didn't work for storage and distribution, and they certainly weren't going to work for retail. So we needed to redesign the codes themselves and make them industry specific. And then we wanted to make sure that we updated those system elements and the good industry practice, your GMPs, GAPs, et cetera, to focus on those latest food safety issues and regulatory requirements. Yes, I'm talking FSMA. So we wanted to make sure that we were going to update what we needed to update with the latest and the greatest, what was impacting our industry when it came to emerging issues like environmental monitoring and listeria, or mislabeling of allergens time and time and time again. That was our key top reason for recall. And then also, what was the concerns with FSMA? Love or hate FSMA, they put together an excellent approach for food safety, and we wanted to take what some of those key parts are and what's plaguing our industry with challenges and opportunities and issues. We wanted to put that in our code. And we wanted, third, is to build those quality elements to address continuous improvement. What we heard is we would walk into a level 3 facility. We couldn't even believe it was a level 3. The interpretation of those quality elements wasn't being fully executed. And so we had to address that concern. And we also heard from our stakeholders that they were hesitant to go for level 3, hesitant to take that next step because they didn't want their food safety certification affected. So we wanted to address that concern as well. And then, of course, GFSI, that's why we're here, that's what we do, and we wanted to make sure that we included those requirements for that was in the new benchmarking document that was just released about a month ago, and make sure that we synced up with them as well. So those were our four goals to give you an idea as to what we needed to do in order to move forward with our code. Alrighty, so the structure of Edition 8 is a bit different. You can see we have new codes, we have new code covers. We aren't just one holistic code, so we have 7 new codes right now. We have 7 new codes right now. We have 7 new codes right now. If somebody called in on the phone, can you either mute your speakers or mute your line? Thank Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we have 7 new codes, and the first one is our level 1 and now it's food safety fundamentals. Our level 2, as you remember, is all on food safety. So now we have 5 individual codes for addressing food safety, primary production, manufacturing, storage and distribution, food packaging, and food retail. And then also the SQF quality code as well. So 7 different codes that was once jam-packed into everything into one code. We now have 7 different codes. And so what does that mean to you? These 7 distinct codes are customized to meet the needs of the industry in all of those areas. I don't know if anybody knew we even had a food packaging code or a code for storage and distribution, or all the different codes that addressed our primary production. So when we had one giant code, it got lost on all the distinct codes that we had, and it also merged all the issues under one big food safety umbrella, and we needed to separate them out so that we can address those food safety concerns, and especially the quality concerns specific to that industry scope. So these 7 distinct codes are easily to identify because they have the code covers, the different color code covers. If you can go on our website, SQFI.com, you can just click on one of those codes and you'll be able to just download that code. You don't have to worry about downloading the entire code. You can print off the code. It's easier to print. It's just easier to access, and it's easier to highlight which industry scope you're in. It still maintains that farm to fork solution. So if you are a vertically integrated operation where you have different industry scopes, whether you do production and storage and distribution or manufacturing of food packaging materials, it still has that farm to fork solution because we base those system elements all on each. They're uniquely worded, but they all have the same content information. So it still maintains that farm to fork solution. However, we had the ability now to have unique system elements tailored to that industry sector, as well as the Part A. And we'll go into those details, but Part A, when we're evaluating audit duration times, or even just speaking the needs of that industry, it really is more customized to that industry now. So the Edition 8 structure speaks more specifically to your industry scope. So the Edition 8 changes, just in a nutshell, we have the same 3 levels, just a different approach. So instead of calling level 1, now we call it food safety fundamental. It's your basic approach. HACCP isn't required. It won't be GFSI benchmarked because there's no HACCP requirement. And it's just a basic entry level for new businesses. It's a certification, accredited certification, but it's just a basic level. The food safety codes, again, that was formerly that level 2. It covers primary production, manufacturing, storage and distribution, and manufacture of food packaging materials, and then also food retail as well. So a food safety code for those 5 industries. The quality code is a separate code now. It used to be level 3, so our system elements used to be landscaped where we had level 1, level 2, level 3. It's still the same approach, but the level 3, the quality code is now pulled out. So these system elements are specific to quality. And I'll go into some detail as we move along this presentation. So just to give you a generic update, and then I'll go into the nitty-gritty in the next few slides. The food safety fundamentals, again, that was formerly level 1. It is applying to the manufacturing of food packaging, primary production, and distribution. So modules 7, 11, 12, and 13. That's the applicable modules for food safety fundamentals. So right now we don't have a lot of certificates to food safety fundamentals. We have about 50 certificates. So it's not a lot of certificates, but once we pull this out, this might bring more recognition. And as we move forward with those smaller suppliers that are looking to see what accredited certification and the value that brings, might tap into this module. We changed the system elements, so what was reflected in manufacturing for the level 2 or the food safety codes is now in the food safety fundamentals. We still did not include HACCP, and it still will not be GFSI benchmarked. The food safety code for manufacturing, so this has a separate Part A and system elements from the fundamentals, from the primary, storage and distribution, and the manufacturer of food packaging codes. It covers produce, pack house, slaughterhouses, and all food manufacturing, basically FSCs 4, 7 through 22, 25, 31, and 34. So now this includes also animal feed and pet food. So the modules would be 9, 10, and 11. And of course, this will be submitted to GFSI for benchmarking. Just as a note, GFSI only benchmarks to food safety. It does not benchmark to quality. So our quality code won't be submitted just because that's not an option. The primary production code, separate Part A in system elements. It covers all the pre-farm gate activities from livestock, produce, and aquaculture, and covers FSCs 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 with modules 5, 6, 7, 7H with the harmonized module through the United Fresh Organization Association, and module 8 as well. And of course, this will be submitted to GFSI. Storage and distribution, just storage and distribution practices for transportation, storage and distribution of perishable and non-perishable food and feed products. So it's just module 12. And of course, this will be submitted to GFSI under that industry scope. And same as the manufacturer of food packaging materials, this is to module 13, food sector category 27, and it addresses items that are used in food manufacturing or food service, meaning paper towels, napkins, straws, stirs, etc. So all of that is included now in this code. And then new to our family is the food safety code for food retail. These are system elements in the module 15, and that it is brand new. The system elements are very different than the other food safety codes, and it covers those good retail practices as well. So there will be a corporate and a store level audit, a multi-site option, and this food sector category is 24. And then finally, the quality code. This was formerly level 3, and it is specific to the quality elements. Now, you can't have a standalone quality code audit. You have to have a food safety code. You have to be certified under a food safety code. You can do it in conjunction, the quality code audit, in conjunction with your food safety audit or separate from, but you need to have a certification in one of the food safety codes. So it applies to all of the different food safety codes and industry scopes except for retail. So you can use the quality code. We synced up these system elements in line with what the food safety system elements are. And again, I'll go into the detail in just a little bit. So now I want to go over what I'm going to do in this presentation is review Part A. So give you the update to Part A, and then I'll go into the specific codes. I'll start with manufacturing, and then we'll move on. But Part A basically is the same. So the appendixes or appendices and the Part A are basically the same in all of the codes, except for quality. There's differences in there. There are a few differences, mainly in the audit duration. So the difference is really in the language that we use. So instead of site, we use farm for primary. Instead of site, we use distribution facility, et cetera. So the language is customized to that industry scope. And then the audit duration is tailored to meet that industry scope, whether we think it's, 1 day versus 2 days, et cetera. So just little differences, but generally it's all the same. The scoring, the closeout of nonconformances, how you handle surveillance audits, those kinds of things are all the same. Same thing with the appendices. The appendices are the food sector categories, the glossary of terms, the multi-site requirements, as well as the use of the quality shield and the use of the logo. All of those remain the same per the code itself. So I'm going to go over you the differences of the Part A and know that they apply to all of the food safety codes, from fundamentals all the way through the food safety codes that are going to be benchmarked to GFSI. So what we did is in Part A, first off, we added a requirement that all operational and cleaning shifts and pre-optional inspections shall be audited where applicable. So we wanted to make sure that we're looking at all different types of shifts during the audit itself. And this goes, back to what we were talking about regarding changing up the audit approach. So we want to make sure that auditors have an opportunity to look at all different shifts during the course of the audit. We did include an option for corporate audits and an approach for corporate audits. So if there is multiple manufacturing facilities under one corporate umbrella, and that corporate umbrella develops multitude of the document programs that are implemented at the site, then there's an option for a corporate audit. It's not mandatory, but what we wanted to do was create an approach for those sites that wanted to have their documentation and their audit their corporate included in the audit. Now, there's no certificate for the corporate site, but it will be all that information will be disseminated down into the sites themselves. Also understand that any of the nonconformances that were raised during the corporate audit have the opportunity to be closed out prior to the facility audit. And if those nonconformances aren't closed out, then they just trickle down to the facility audit. So we made that piece for the corporate audit. Again, it's just an option. It's not a requirement. We added 2 new mandatory elements, one for complaint management, and that's against all scopes, and then the other one on allergen management, and that's applicable for all but primary. We changed the corrective action closeout timeframe, so minors and majors are now closed out in 30 days. Prior to this, it used to be 14 days for majors, 30 days for minors. Now both of them have a 30-day closeout period. We removed OIPs as a response altogether. So that's no longer an option under the SQF audit. So no more opportunities for improvement. The only primary responses are compliant, major, minor, critical, non-applicable, and exempt. The unannounced audit protocol, we did some benchmarking to that. We evaluated what's the results of the unannounced audit, and the scores remained the same. The nonconformities pretty much remained the same. We never, well, not, I don't want to say never, but we didn't receive much feedback or issues, complaints, anything out of the ordinary that would indicate that the unannounced audits are failing or not working as intended. But what we did see, and the feedback that we heard from retailers as well as some of the manufacturers, is that management commitment changes, because when you are needing to be ready 24/7, 365, then your management commitment changes. You are allocated resources for backups. You're provided everybody's more attuned to what the SQF food safety audit is about, etc. So we wanted to enhance this. So we kept the protocol is the same. So nothing has changed. It's still 3 certification cycles. But we did add a provision for voluntary annual unannounced audits. So for those facilities that volunteer to have an annual unannounced audit, then you would be designated on your certificate. So recognition on the certificate as an SQF Select supplier would indicate to your buyer, to your retailer, that you're committed to an annual unannounced audit program. And so we're communicating that to our retail members, stating, look for the Select supplier on the certificate, and that's the supplier that's volunteering to do annual unannounced audits. And so it's a recognition to you that you're conducting those annual unannounced audits. We changed surveillance audits. So it's a surveillance audit that follows a suspension, right? It used to be an SQF audit. So now a surveillance audit that's following suspension is now termed as an on-site visit. So it's no longer an SQF audit, meaning it's not scored or ranked or your score doesn't change. And that visit is unannounced now. Withdrawn sites, we issued this policy in December, and now this is incorporated into the code. Withdrawn sites are posted on our website, SQFI.com, for 12 months, and any site that's been withdrawn is required to wait 12 months before reapplying for certification. We have a whole new section on compliance now. So our section on compliance indicates that sites may be required to allow shadow audits, witness audits, validation audits to occur, meaning one of the auditors is going to be witnessed or shadowed or a validation audit. And we put the provision in there that this shouldn't change the direction of the audit. It shall not change the direction of the audit. It doesn't mean that there's now an extra pair of eyes on the audit, or that the audit time should be extended, or that there should be more cost to the supplier. So we clarified the role of these compliance activities and the role that the supplier takes, and where there would or would not be any changes. And then also we did redesign the food sector categories for clear identification of the industry scopes. And here's a list of those food sector categories that were changed. So FSC 2, that was in edition 7.2, is no longer in use. And that used to be, well, it's growing of harvest of animal feed. And what we did is combine that with FSC 34. So it didn't go away, we just combined it with FSC 34. FSC 3 is the growing and production of fresh produce, and we added nuts to that description. So now it's fresh produce and nuts. FSC 4 includes fresh produce and nuts as well for packhouse operations. FSC 11, honey processing, we added apiculture to the FSC description. So that used to be under FSC 1, the actual growing of the bees and the extraction of the honey. So that used to be in FSC 1, and now that's combined all together in FSC 11. Canning, we added high-pressure processing to the description, so HPP is now added. Food ingredient manufacturer, we clarified that what we wanted was dry coffee and dry tea to that description. It used to be miscommunication, and we were putting that under FSC 16, beverages. So we added dry coffee and tea to this description now. The new FSC 24 for food retailing actually now has a system elements in module 15 to accompany that. Before there was nothing in use. FSC 25 has been redesigned, so that used to be in conjunction with FSC 26, but FSC 25 is a new FSC for assembling whole produce and packaged products like gift baskets, gift boxes, etc. And that's under Module 11. It's under food manufacturing, manufacturing of food, and Module 11. FSC 26 is food storage and distribution, and it's one FSC now. So it combines both general and produce storage and distribution practices. We eliminated FSC 28, 29, and 30, as well as FSC 35, which is brokers. So we eliminated the food sector category for brokers, and that's no longer an option with SQF. What we're stating with brokers now is that while the broker really doesn't need to be certified, what we're expecting is that these brokers go back to their suppliers and tell them that they need to be certified. In a sense, that's all what the broker category is we're asking that broker to evaluate their suppliers and their food safety practices. So all that broker needs to do to demonstrate to their retailer moving forward is that their suppliers are following SQF. Okay, so now I'm going to go over the system elements, those key changes in the system elements. Now I'm reflecting on the manufacturing code because that's our base. That's always been our base, is the manufacturing code. We took the information from the manufacturing code and then we modified it to fit the other industry scopes. So I'm going to speak from the manufacturing code, those system element changes. And then I'll go into each of the individual codes themselves and highlight those changes. So for the SQF code, the Edition 8 system elements, holistically, we changed site. And we changed everything to site. So we don't use organization, we don't use supplier, we don't use facility. Our intent is that site better describes what our expectation is of that site. So supplier often was confusing. It was confusing because we didn't know if it was the supplier, meaning the facility that was undergoing SQF certification, or the supplier that was supplying into the facility that was undergoing SQF certification. So it got very confusing, and instead of trying to clarify it throughout the code, we just changed everything to site, and that site indicates that it is the facility that the address of that facility that is undergoing the SQF certification audit. There was an emphasis on senior management. So we looked at senior management, and we had several changes to that. We wanted to provide more background and more emphasis on this very, very important element. What we found when we looked at not just those top nonconformances, we're not going to look at those anymore. We want to look at the top ones that are in compliance. So what we see is that senior management, that's always been the top compliant item. And so we're looking at that thinking, how are we auditing against this? So we added a new element on change management. So if there are facilities that with key personnel changes, then what is the facility doing in order to have any type of change management approach and managing that change so that food safety is not impacted. We also emphasized site management responsibility, their responsibility for training and communication for food safety. We're requiring monthly meetings now between the senior site management and the SQF practitioner. And we also put a requirement in there regarding the checking of the blackout periods during unannounced audits. So before, we had expectations of the supplier, expectations of the auditor when it came to unannounced audits, and we wanted the auditor to validate that those blackout periods that were identified by the supplier, reasons why the unannounced audit couldn't occur, we wanted them to validate that that actually no production occurred during those dates, because it can only be for legitimate business reasons. There's no production, et cetera. And so now we put a provision in there regarding senior site management and their commitment to saying, yes, that we're validating that. So the auditor now has an opportunity to designate those, to check those designated blackout dates. And under business continuity, we changed this to crisis management planning. We provided a couple more details under crisis management, but the gist of it is that we changed the terminology for a more industry-speaking term. Significant details around the food safety plan. So we broke this particular element out into 17 different sub-elements, and it's more detailed, more specific when it comes to the implementation and the expectation of that food safety plan. So we wanted to break it out. So again, 17 different elements with the 24317. It has now a requirement to require regulatory controls as well as codex, and that's speaking to the different types of regulations that are out there, whether it's the PC rule or the new rules in Canada, Mexico, et cetera. So we wanted to create more detail around the food safety plan. Still follows codex, but we broke it out into those individual steps. We added a new element on food fraud, as well as a new element on food defense for incoming materials. So how is the site evaluating the materials that they're getting into their operation to ensure there's no economic adulteration or intentional adulteration to those materials? So these were new elements that were added to address that. New element, or actually it's not a new element, but it was in the PRP module. We now put that in as a system element, environmental monitoring. So we are expecting all sites all food manufacturing sites to have environmental monitoring as part of their risk assessment. Now, to the level of that environmental monitoring program is certainly based on the risks to that facility. You may have some, this is not a mandatory element, so you may have some sites that would exempt out or look at this as a non-applicable, but they would first have to conduct a risk assessment to identify their environmental needs. Now, their needs could be annual assessment, their need could be a daily assessment. It depends on the risk to that facility. The environmental monitoring approach hasn't changed much since what we put in Module 11, neither is the definition. So it follows the same practices, but what we were finding is that sites weren't saying how they're addressing environmental monitoring in their facility. Rather, they were arguing why they weren't a high-risk facility in the first place. So we changed that requirement, and now environmental monitoring is in the system element. So it's not mandatory, but the site has to conduct a risk assessment to assess their environmental needs. Continuing on, we added a new element regarding product startups and changeovers, 2613. We added a whole new section on food fraud per GFSI. This is under site security and food fraud. So two separate requirements for food defense, and then 272 is new food fraud requirement. So this is going to require a vulnerability assessment, mitigation plan, record review, and this is regarding what opportunities and threats are there in the facility for potential economic fraud. So food fraud is defined as economic fraud as it relates to food safety for intentional economic fraud. So you are substituting an ingredient because it's cheaper, even though, you know, it's not approved or hasn't been tested for food safety. It hasn't gone through that assessment. So new food fraud requirements are now part of the SQF Code. 2.8, identity preserved foods, that was moved to the SQF Quality Code. So this is not a part of the food safety program. It wasn't in 7.2. We discussed putting it into in 8.0, but based off the public feedback and comments, we didn't put that in there. And then we also have clear allergen requirements. So we split this up into several distinct elements. This is a mandatory requirement. However, it's not mandatory for animal feed. It's mandatory for pet food from a risk assessment point of view. So it's been tailored for the pet food industry in that a risk assessment has to be conducted, which is what it has to do right now. And for animal feed, it's not mandatory at all. So it's been split into several distinct elements. We added one requirement that says that allergen management programs shall include the identification, management, and labeling of products containing gluten where applicable, because for some, gluten is not one of those major elements. Wheat is, but gluten is not, so we added that in there. And we split it up and focused on label, focused on product changeovers, as it relates to allergen programs. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear. That was one of our top areas of recall, mislabeling of allergens and allergen controls in general, and we wanted to address that specifically in our code. So those are the system elements as it relates to food manufacturing and holistically in general what they relate to the other codes. And I'll go into the other codes and those specific changes as well, but generally we added those in there. So the key changes for Module 11 now. So Module 11 is the PRPs for most of our industry scopes. Anything, you know, from FSC 8 all the way to 22, includes also 31 through 34 food sector categories. So if you're any of these, here are some of the key changes, and I tried to chunk them out rather than going in order. I chunked them out in sections, so to give you an idea of what some of the sections are that we changed. So under pest control, we changed generally vermin to pests So we don't call them vermin, we call pests, and then flies to insects. So not in any flying insect, not just flies. So we made that distinction. And we added a requirement that the personal access areas are there to protect against the ingress of dust, vermin, and other pests. We clarified that poison rodenticide bait rather than just poison bait, because there's a lot of confusion in that. In general, we changed integrated pest management to pest prevention. So we made this as just, I know it's just a semantics, I know it's just a change in wording. However, what we wanted to do is change the mentality of it. It's not pest control, it's not pest management. We don't want you to control those pests when they come into their facility or manage them. We want you to prevent them. We want the site to prevent them from getting into the facility in the first place. When we look at these top nonconformances in this area, what we see is all those prevention measures that are being marked as nonconformances. When you're looking at doors that are open, gaps and seals, and fans without screens, and all of that, broken screens, screens that aren't flush, and that you look at the records, the pest control records, and you see marking of fly activity, but yet nothing's been done about that. So a lot of the prevention measures aren't being addressed. So we looked at this as from a pest prevention perspective instead of management or control. And we added new elements on pest activity and recording pest activity and evaluating the trends of the pest activity. And then a new element regarding records and the disposal and investigation and resolution of that pest activity. So some key changes in pest activity or in the pest prevention program. Under equipment and cleaning and sanitation, we added some new, a new requirement, 11291. This is a new requirement regarding specifications for equipment, utensils, and protective clothing. So we wanted the site to have a role in the selection of the equipment that and the protective clothing that is being used in the facility. So what are those specifications? Meaning, oftentimes, and I know because I worked in manufacturing, when there's just a new piece of equipment shows up, and engineering or maintenance are the ones that pick out this equipment. They got a good deal, it's been refurbished, we just need to clean it up, whatever it might be. However, QA or sanitation rarely have a say in it until it's actually in the facility. So there needs to be specifications, a process, a procedure for purchasing these types of equipment so that we're not getting the wrong type of equipment in the facility, equipment that was used to process peanuts, and you're in a peanut-free facility. Or, and I'll use a real-life example, and that is a real-life example, somebody told me that, but another example is in the Jensen farm. They used the wrong piece of equipment for that cantaloupe, for the cleaning of the cantaloupe. So we need to have specifications to ensure that the equipment that we're using in our facility, cleanable, maintained, sanitary, all those things. So QA, maintenance, sanitation, they all need to work together so when new equipment comes in, it's fit within their operation. We added a couple other requirements regarding equipment design and construction to ensure it meets the applicable regulatory requirements. Product containers, we added information that they're readily cleaned, new element regarding re-cleaning of equipment in order to control contamination, new element regarding temporary repairs and how temporary repairs can be used within the facility, that they're dated, that they have a point of removal, that they are able to be cleaned and sanitized and included in the cleaning and sanitation schedule. Requirements for pre-op inspection conducted after maintenance has conducted activities on the line. We added requirements on detergents and sanitizers, as well as a new element regarding the mixed concentrations and how that's being monitored. So there's a couple changes, new changes and good changes regarding equipment and cleaning and sanitation. Few changes on personnel. We eliminated the reference to first aid facilities. So the intent for those first aid facilities was really to contain bodily fluids. So what we were getting were some nonconformances that were written to expiration dates on medicines or the eye wash or whatever it would be. And, you know, we're not here to do an OSHA compliant audit. It's a food safety audit, and the intent of those first aid facilities was really bodily fluids. So we removed that reference and added a reference to contamination caused by bodily fluids. So it's more about the action that's taken if there is an accident at the facility that's caused by bodily fluids, vomiting, diarrhea, bloodborne, whatever it might be. So what is the procedure that the facility has in place in order to contain that impact to food safety? And also new element about visitors regarding visitors shall be trained or escorted at all times. New requirement regarding toilets and that there's an area for storing protective clothing, etc., if applicable. And then a new requirement about outside eating areas and cleaned and maintained. New requirements on water and air quality. We keep trying to clarify this one. So we clarified some of these. So we added a new element regarding water used in processing and how it shall be tested or treated if needed. The water analysis uses samples shall be taken within the facility, and the analysis is risk-based, really at a minimum annually. Compressed air includes other gases. So it's not just compressed air, but it's other gases, whether it's a nitrogen blend or in packaging, whatever it might be. And then instead of microbiological purity, and that was always a hard one to monitor, a hard one to validate, a hard one to control, hard one to verify, really. So we identified it with applicable food safety hazards. So it's not just regarding microbiological, but it's looking at biological, it's looking at chemical, et cetera, especially when it comes to some of those blends of air. Storage and handling requirements. What we found in edition 7.2 is that we were focused specifically on the condition of the room of the storage facility. So what were the conditions of the room, but not so much the handling and the storage of the actual food or non-food item. So now we added a new requirement, a new section on having a storage plan in place. We also added a new requirement on the control of trademark materials. So if you have trademark materials, if you're making products specifically for a retailer, for Kroger or Publix, and if you're a private label, how are you controlling that trademark material? And then also a new element on the disposal of waste as it's going to animal feed. So we added that as a brand new element. So those are the elements, or the key changes for edition, for Module 11. Now I'm going to go into the primary system elements and understand that those system elements that we implemented for food manufacturing generally follow. I'm going to highlight some of the different things as well. So 2211 includes or references those written procedures for the good agricultural practices or good production practices in order to support the maintenance of the system. We remove, or in system elements, we removed the shelf life study requirements and added references specifically to primary production. We consolidated the requirements for contract manufacturers and simplified the language as it's more specific to primary production. Throughout that, we changed, instead of food safety fundamentals, we clarified and used GAPs, GDPs, GRPs, GMPs, rather than food safety fundamentals, because that's our level 1 code. A couple more is we added a specific reference to HACCP-based module usage and requirements. So what were those specific requirements that the HACCP-based program needs to be validated, verified? And we revised and simplified requirements for non-performing products, as well as allergen management, simplified just so it speaks more towards primary production. Still contains those system elements in general. However, we revised them so it speaks more to that on-the-farm primary production. Now I'll go over Module 7, and I know that primary has other modules underneath it. However, I'm just going to focus on Module 7. So my focus was on Module 11 for manufacturing, and it's going to be Module 7 for primary. We added potable water requirements for hand washing. We revised the entire section and removed any references to processing and manufacturing and looked at it from operations, good handling, on the farm, etc. We looked at glass houses and hydroponics and added mushrooms in there as well. It's always been a tricky one. We designed a clarification for controlled atmosphere storage. Again, pest and vermin to pest prevention, trending activities included. And then we also changed the exclusion of domestic and wild animals just to say that control of domestic and wild animals, so it's not just a straight-out exclusion. In 7322, added the requirements to wash hands before putting on gloves. We, again, removed the first aid requirements, added the provision on bodily fluids. We moved the pre-harvest assessment and form matter and glass procedures, and now it's included under harvesting and field practices. We added a few more requirements to personnel or personal practices for those that are doing field packing work, and looked at consolidating the requirements for transportation. We added the requirement that no raw untreated manure shall be used, and new elements for chemical applications, and again, the control of disposal or trademarked materials was added to primary as well. For storage and distribution elements, again, these storage and distribution elements are following generally what manufacturing has. So they have the general manufacturing requirements, but they're more specific to storage and distribution. So the first one that we looked at is the specification for contract services, or specification and contract services. So we wanted to take a look at this one. We eliminated, under specification and contract services, we eliminated the requirement for product development, and now it is specific to...
Have we found any more...
Excuse me, can you please mute your phone? Thank you. And so we looked at specification and contract services and eliminated the product development. And we specifically looked at how we could formulate this and change this so that it speaks more towards the storage and distribution practices. There was always confusion as to the requirement and how it relates to those products that are received into the facility for storage, distribution, and later sale, versus those products that are received into the facility to be used in the facility, like the cleaning and sanitation chemicals, etc. So we wanted to differentiate them. And so we have two different requirements now. So product handling requirements for products intended for distribution versus product handling requirements for products that are going to be used in-house. We use the terminology, product description, rather than specifications, because what we were requiring of storage and distribution facilities under 7.2 were to have specifications on file, were to check the incoming materials to see that they meet those specifications, and that's not the role of the storage and distribution facility. Rather, they are there to check product and handling requirements, and that's how we changed this this module so that it speaks more to those activities for storage and distribution. We looked at, instead of contract manufacturers, it's contract third-party storage or distributors. So there are some facilities that contract out a particular function, freezing, dry storage, whatever it might be, refrigeration, and we included that in these requirements. So it's not a manufacturer, but it's a storage and distributor. Under 2.4.3 for food safety, we added that the HACCP-based approach can be applied here. So GFSI has added that into their requirements. So we added that into storage and distribution. So HACCP by Codex, and it can be followed by a HACCP-based approach. Environmental monitoring is not applicable for storage and distribution. I want it to be clear. While there is a section heading, environmental monitoring, because we wanted to ensure that we maintained the numbering in the system elements across all of the different industry codes. So it says not applicable. So there is an element, 2.4.8, it's environmental monitoring. However, it's not applicable for storage and distribution, and that's clear. And then allergen management requirements are consolidated to address the industry, the storage and distribution industry. So it's more about storage and handling and containing if there are any incidences of broken products that contain allergen materials. What are their processes and procedures for containing that as to not cross-contact? So a couple differences within the storage distribution elements. In Module 12, we added some requirements and made it clearer throughout the code that it's referencing those storage and distribution practices. So we removed the reference to pre-op. So there aren't any pre-op activities. However, there is inspection after cleaning is conducted. We added that new element regarding bodily fluids and removed the requirement for first aid kits. We removed the reference for employees exposed cuts from engaging in handling and packaging materials. We added a requirement that drinking is allowed in the facility following appropriate conditions, meaning what is the procedure? So water is allowed, but what is the procedure so that there's no cross-contamination? We clarified that the hand dryer is to be used when there is no direct hand contact of food or food contact surfaces, and we added new requirements for drivers and how the drivers are managed within the operation, within the storage and distribution facility. How are they managed and controlled so as to not pose a risk to the other products? Clarified wearing of false fingernails, false eyelashes, long nails is not permitted only when handling food, and hair restraints are used when product is exposed. So again, speaking more to the environment and when product's not exposed, or when materials are packaged, there's a different level of risk there. We deleted the reference to washing, thawing, and treating foods because it's not relevant. We deleted the reference for ice that's used in processing operations because that's not relevant. Again, we went through this and eliminated all the references to processing and manufacturing. We added a new requirement for general storage and handling requirements, just as we did for Module 11. Stock rotation, actually this has been modified throughout all of the different modules. Stock rotation used to be a system element, and now it's been embedded into the good industry practices. So stock rotation is included now in the GDPs, GAPs, GMPs, and the GMPs for food manufacturing of food packaging. We've provided clarification of those differences between chemicals used versus the chemicals stored for distribution and sale. We added receiving requirements rather than unloading practices. So what are those requirements for receiving product into the facility? We added a new requirement for trailer washing and how are trailers maintained and cleaned and where are they washed and where can they be washed. We added a new element on loading, transportation, and unloading, receiving to protect against the contamination from biological, chemical, and physical risks. So we added new elements regarding how those practices are in the actual, what the storage and distribution facility does. They store product, they unload product, they store product, and then they ship out product. So we needed to address that. We also added a new element regarding inspection of trailers and the security of the trailers. We added a requirement on how staging, how the product is staged, ensuring that the product isn't any way is contaminated or potential for contamination, and again, new requirements for receiving. So now on to food packaging, those system elements for food packaging. So for food packaging, again, follows those basic requirements under manufacturing for our food safety code. But what we wanted to do for food packaging is really take a look at this code and speak more to those risks at the manufacturing of food packaging. So there was a debate, and in the public comments that we received excellent public comments. Just on a side note, we received hundreds and hundreds of public comments. We received probably about, I'd say, 700 to 800 public comments regarding all of our different codes. Excellent comments, and for those that took the time to comment on the code, I thank you, because it makes us stronger. We would have added 2.8.1 and identity of preserved foods in the food safety code if it wasn't for the public comments. So your voice was heard, and we looked at all of those individual comments. So one of the comments that we received for the manufacturer of food packaging is that it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear whether we were packaging food or were we manufacturing the food packaging material. It wasn't clear if we should use the word material or if we should use the word product or whatever. So a couple things we followed is that we changed these system elements so that it reflects the manufacture of food packaging and not the actual packaging of food, to make that clear. And we also ensure that the reference to materials is for raw materials and not finished product. Any finished product that's referenced is either product or food packaging. So we wanted to clarify that this is the application to the manufactured of food packaging and address those risks associated with that. So there's a couple new elements that we added in the manufacturing of food packaging code. In the first one is regarding the use of packaging, food packaging that used to provide a functional effect on food to preserve shelf life or maintain food safety as a barrier or whatever, and there are specific requirements so that so it's designed for its intended use. We eliminated the reference to shelf life trials, and instead we added a requirement for records and validated storage conditions. We speak specifically to the approval of artwork because that's very important, and we also speak specifically to those food packaging material that have pre-printing that lists ingredients, allergens, identification codes, etc., so that there are provisions in place to prevent misprinting. We looked at we removed any reference to the validation of those packaging materials coming in. So system elements for manufacturing primary looks at validating the food packaging material coming in, and it just isn't applicable when you're manufacturing food packaging. We modified to include a product ingredient list, making if there's any allergens, identification codes, etc. We removed reference to requirements that aren't applicable to food packaging. Included also in the system elements, looked at reworked product so that any reworked product that's used doesn't contaminate the raw materials or any of the food packaging materials. There's a new element on the handling of any post-consumer recycling materials. There's a new element on the handling of any product recycled product or reworked product that prevents any mixed up or intermingled product. The reworked product includes recycled material as well. We added environmental monitoring, so this is a requirement in the manufacturing of food packaging. There is requirement for product testing as it relates to food packaging. There's new element, so how to manage and verify the correct printing plates, making sure that the right cylinders are used during printing, etc. Those risks associated with the manufacture of food packaging. A new element for procedures for the effective storage of those items, whether it's the printing plates or the cylinders, in making sure that any misprints can be identified. We reworded the recalls, so it's more about the food manufacture of food packaging, how that industry plays, what their role is in recalls. So we reworded that, and then also allergen management is also in food packaging, manufacturing of food packaging, but it's been simplified, addressing those risks, whether it's on a label or whether it's embedded into the food packaging product itself. So mostly these are all changes that address the manufacturer of food packaging industry. So we had to make some changes in those good industry, those good manufacturing practices. So again, customized to fit within the manufacture of food packaging. For floors, we added fit for purpose into the floor because there are some food packaging manufacturers, their raw rooms are really raw. If you're looking at a glass manufacturer and their raw glass that's going to be heated up to thousands of degrees to melt down and use in the application of the manufacture of glass packaging. So we modified it so that it's fit for purpose. We added a new element so that cleaning and sanitation and the idea is to protect the adjacent equipment during cleaning if compressed air hoses are used, because that's typically how they're cleaning. Deleted references to pre-operational inspections. Again, that's not in sync with what that industry represents. Deleted references to cleaners and sanitizers. That's not what they use. Instead, it's more cleaning agents. Added drinking water is permissible under certain conditions. Again, a new element for training of visitors to make sure that they're following the site policy. And that's the requirements for all of the food codes, except for retail, and I'll go over retail in just a little bit. So now I'm going to talk about the quality code and the retail code. So 2 more codes to go through, and then I'll talk about the implementation timeline, the resources that are coming, as well as the resources that you would have available to you. So I have about 15 more minutes, and then I'll go into the Q&A. Alrighty, so the quality code. So the quality code, as I said earlier in the webinar, is independent of the food safety codes. However, that site has to be certified to one of those food safety codes. So the audit can be in conjunction with the food safety audit, or it can be separate. It can be independent, but it can't be prior to the food safety audit. That's what I'm trying to say. My expectation is that the sites will probably go through their food safety certification later on within the certification year, do their quality certification, and then when their recertification for food safety comes along, they'll sync those up. So they can be independent or they can be separate. However, there has to be a certification either in tangent or separate or before the quality audit. So there is a designated quality practitioner. However, that person can be the same as the SQF practitioner. There are specific practitioner requirements. I'll go over those in just a second. Auditors that are going to audit against the quality code have to be trained to the quality code. So we're going to have specific auditor criteria if auditors want to audit against the quality code, and they have to be registered against that criteria, and that's who has to be used. What we were seeing all along and why we separated these this out is that the food safety and the quality were being embedded, and there wasn't enough attention paid to either one. So we weren't doing justice to either one because we were multitasking and we weren't focusing. So now we separated those out, and we wanted to make sure that auditors have the right experience in order to audit against the quality code. The audit duration can vary, and we didn't really set an audit duration time. Instead, we put parameters that states the audit duration can vary based off of the number of products, the number of critical quality points that are out there. So there's a lot of different variations that would affect the audit duration, if it's in conjunction with the food safety audit or separated from. So it can vary, and we put parameters in there rather than a duration. There aren't any mandatory elements, and all elements are as applicable depending on the scope of that certification. The scope of the quality audit has to mimic the scope of the food safety certification. So if there's any exemptions in the food safety certification, it would be exempted in the quality audit as well. There's major and minor, we call them quality deviations. We're not calling them nonconformances. There are no critical deviations in the quality code. It's not scored or rated. So successful completion, if all deviations are closed out within 30 days, you pass. Now, there is a provision for a surveillance audit, and that's conducted if there were 2 majors identified or 10 minor quality deviations. So if you close out your quality, if you close out all of your deviations, you will be issued the certification. However, a surveillance would occur if there's 2 major or 10 minor quality deviations, and that's a 6-month audit. There are no unannounced audits within these provisions. It would tag along. If the unannounced food safety audit occurs, then this would be a part of that as well. For the system elements have been designed to follow along the system elements for food safety. So the numbering, the heading, everything syncs up so that the quality parameters are highlighted within that particular section heading. So in management responsibility, while in the system elements for management responsibility, it focuses on food safety, the quality aspects focus on quality, whether it's designating the quality practitioner, all right? So that those requirements that are there within the food safety requirements in the system elements now mimic in the quality code. So there are additional requirements for the SQF quality practitioner. That practitioner has to be competent in SPC or other quality tools. There has to be a quality communication program. How is the quality program being communicated and followed through with for all personnel on site? Benchmarking of the quality performance. There's a requirement to resolve not just food safety, but those quality complaints. There's customer contact in event of a crisis that affects the supply chain. So now that's in 2152. There's a quality system manual that includes statistical process control or SPC or other quality tools. Commercial realization includes quality considerations, not similar to what was in level 3 before. Validation of product formula and manufacturing processes. Looking if a contract manufacturer is manufacturing for sites that have a quality certification, then they also have to be evaluated against their quality system requirements. Finished product specs, evaluation of the quality requirements, continual review of those customer requirements and expectations. The storage and transportation emphasizes loss, waste, damage. The food quality plan threat equals the hazard, and it's controlled at the CQP. So that approach has not changed. We're still looking at that HACCP approach for quality. So instead of a food safety threat, we're not looking at, instead of a food safety hazard, we're looking at a food quality threat. So they're CQPs, so they're controlled at CQPs. And following still that same HACCP approach, those same 12 steps that we use for food safety, following it for food quality as well. Use of statistical controls now to optimize product processes, and food fraud includes quality parameters. So, 10% fruit juice declaration has to be 10%, not 5% or watered down, et cetera. So looking at those parameters, all right? So quality only affects those system elements. Then you're also following those PRPs through, okay? So whatever relevant module you have. So understand the quality code only affects those system elements, and that's what would be audited against. But if you look at this, it's really not, there's some key differences, emphasis on SPC, emphasis on process evaluations, those kinds of things, quality parameters. But for the most part, some of these were already pulled over. If you look at the quality code versus the level 3, most of these were already in there. They just look significantly different because we pulled them out and made them specifically to quality. So I'll go into the food retail code, give you an overview of what our new code is for food retail. So this new code was developed by industry, by our retail members, as well as certification bodies and other technical experts that we had sit on this committee. And we identified what needed to be required to have a successful food retail code. And we evaluated and we looked at the 2 roles. One, the role of the corporate function, as well as the execution at the store level. So we wrote this code so that it can apply to pretty much 3 different approaches. First would be your traditional retail store. It would be your public retail store, whether it's Publix, Kroger, your local Jewel, Fresh Time, Mariano's, whatever it might be, that has a corporate function, and that corporate role is to develop and manage food safety, and then as it's disseminated across all the stores. So that's role number 1. Role number 2 would be just your independent grocer. So they manufacture or they develop all of their food safety plans, executed at the store level. It's all under one roof, and maybe they have 1 or 2 sites, but really small independent manufacturers. And the third would actually be a retail outlet associated with the manufacturing facility. So you could be, in my days I made sausage, fresh sausage that we sold to our retailer, but we also had a retail outlet that you could go and buy directly right from us at the manufacturing facility. So 3 ways to approach and use this food retail store or food retail code. So we looked at it from the corporate perspective, and the corporate audit is an independent review of that organization's SQF system documentation and their food safety plan or recall procedures or cleaning and sanitation procedures, all of that information that's gathered and collected and then disseminated across all of the store levels. So it's the first stage for that certification audit, and it just makes sure that the documentation supports and meets the requirements of the SQF Food Retail Code. Then we have the store audit, and this is where you see if what was developed by corporate, what those food safety policies are actually being executed and at what level. So it's on site by the auditor, and it's conducted when the main processes are operating or when they are in season. So if there's a heart, whether it's the deli operation or bakery or butchery or whatever it might be, that's when it's in season. And that if there is a seasonal item, if it's fresh cut produce, for example, or whatever it might be, canning, bakery, I don't know, that the initial certification is done during that peak operation, and that the entire store is to be reviewed to ensure that there's no function that would impact food safety. So while the pharmacy isn't included in the scope of certification, it's just the food safety. Is there any activities within the pharmacy that could potentially lead to any type of food safety contamination? So the system elements, the food retail still has system elements, and they still have GRPs, good retail practices. They mimic similar to what we have in place, looking at management responsibility and commitment, records and document control, specification and products, having a food safety plan, a risk-based approach for food safety, validation verification, crisis management, traceability, labeling, product identification, food defense, and then, of course, their training operations. So these programs and policies, these system elements are typically developed at the corporate level and will be audited as part of the corporate audit. But for those independent or for those retail outlets, they would be included as a single site. And then for food retail, Module 15 is those good retail practices, and it is looking at just basic general good retail practices, site requirements, and approval, making sure that the site isn't surrounded by anything that would contaminate the food into the operation, construction, sales area, personal hygiene within the site, personal processing practices, whether it's in the deli, bakery, etc. Storage and transportation. Storage is one of their key functions in when retail. And then water and ice, waste disposal, receiving and transportation as well. So all of these are included in the food retail code. So your basic application. So now let's talk about the time to implement. I'll talk about what some of the resources we have, and then I'll take Q&A. So about 5 more minutes from me, and then we'll go on to Christy, and she can provide those questions that you've been asking. So just in a nutshell, here you are. Here we are. January 4th, we posted our code for public comment. Public comment ended. We're here. Actually, it's April 6th, not March 31st, but we published the code on March 31st, last Friday. And the implementation date is January 2nd, 2018. So that's when the SQF code will be implemented. I know there was talk that you typically have a 6-month implementation period, but because of the layout, I don't want to say I just went through an hour discussing the changes, and I'm going to say there weren't that many changes, but I don't think there were that many significant changes, except for the removal of the level 3 and a separate quality code. And in the public comment, we received a lot of feedback, and I'm asking us to delay the implementation so that those level 3 sites that are going to have to convert to the quality code have an opportunity to do so. Now, understand that quality code for most sites are voluntary unless your retailer expects you to have level 3. So what we are trying to do is educate and work with our retailers, understand what these differences are, and making sure that there's enough time to execute that. But a little bit more detail and what your expectation is. So here's a timeline of some of those resources that you are wanting and the questions that we've been receiving. So we released Edition 8 on March 31st. We are going to post those code change documents. So that's number one question we're getting in is where's the comparison from 7.2 to 8.0? And that will be posted next week. And it'll be a gradual posting. So keep checking back. We'll start with manufacturing. We'll move on to primary, distribution, food packaging, and so on. So we're going to post them as they come across. So there will be a gradually posting next week, and we'll be posting them to SQFI.com. So those code change documents are going to take a look at what was in 7.2 versus what's in Edition 8 and that specific change, whether it's a numbering change, et cetera. And on the numbering change, we did not intentionally, we tried to minimize the changes in numbers. So there are some differences in numbers because we added environmental monitoring, so that kicked the numbering system off a little bit. And so there were little tweaks in the numbering system, whether it's in the system elements or the module itself, but we tried hard to keep them the same, knowing that numbering is an issue. But we'll identify where the numbers changed, et cetera, and that's what that code change document is. We are working on the development of those instructor-led training. So SQF, and I'm not sure if you're aware of our training centers, but we have licensed training centers. So if you're going to a training center, if you're using a training center or a trainer, ask if they are a licensed SQF training center. If they're not, then they don't have the latest and greatest material. Instead, they're using something that they made up, and it might be fine, it might not be fine. It's something that we did not develop, though. So if you are using a training center, check to see if they're licensed, because they're the ones that will be receiving the latest and greatest, especially for Edition 8. So these will be available. It's coming soon, and I don't know when. I just said May because I'm pretty sure it will be April, but I don't want to say April in case it's May. But they will be sent to these licensed training centers. So again, make sure you're using a licensed training center. They're credentialed through us, the trainers are, as well as receiving the latest and greatest information. Our guidance documents will be developed. So our guidance documents will be developed and posted in July. We're going to look at manufacturing, primary storage and distribution, as well as manufacturer food packaging. So we'll be working on these guidance documents and post them to SQFI.com. And the updated criteria. So we'll be updating our auditor, our quality auditor, and the certification body criteria, and that will be posted in July as well to our website. Then I'm not sure if anybody is familiar either, but SQFI has online training, and this online training is implementing SQF for food safety, as well as a new quality course. And these will be available in September. I say Q3 is September, so somewhere around September, and that will be available online. So the opportunity to have the quality course online or the implementing course to Edition 8 online will be available in September. Otherwise, go to your licensed training center. So full implementation of Edition 8 will be January 2nd. Edition 8 will be fully implemented and apply to all of the desk audit, site certification, recertification. If you're having an audit January 2nd or later, then you will be under Edition 8, recertification audits. If your initial certification audit commences with the desk audit prior to January 2nd, so you're a new facility or a new site, and you started your desk audit in November, and then you're going to have your site audit in mid-January, you can use the 7.2 document checklist as well, and then have the full audit to Edition 8. So the site certification will be to Edition 8, knowing that there could be some document review that will be checked on site. So 7.2 checklist, if it will be prior to January 2nd for desk audits, and then full site audit to Edition 8 after January 2nd. Any surveillance audit, if you are under 7.2 and you received a surveillance audit, so let's say you are audited in, let's say November of 2017, you would be audited under Edition 7.2, your recertification audit, and you received a C compliant. Now you have to have a 6-month surveillance audit. That 6-month surveillance audit will be under Edition 7.2 in May of 2018. So if you're under a surveillance audit, you will be audited against the code of your initial or your recertification audit. So this is the implementation plan. Pretty much Edition 8 come January 2nd, everybody's going to be under Edition 8. So what are some of the resources that you have available to you? Again, tap into your licensed training center. They will have the new materials, and they'll have materials they've been working on. The training centers have been working on developing training for manufacturing, developing training for storage and distribution, developing training for food packaging. We'll have training for food retail available. We'll have training for primary production. So tap into your licensed training center. They will have those latest and greatest materials. Some of them will offer Edition 8 summary training. So they might offer a one-day, here's what you need to know based off of the changes of Edition 8. and they're going to offer a one-day class. So tap into those licensed training centers. If you don't know where to go on our website, SQFI.com, under training centers, left-hand nav bar, list of training centers. Go there, click on a training center, and you'll be able to see who's licensed and able to teach the materials that we're providing them. Now, we will have quality code training, but that's a separate license. So when you're checking with your training center, make sure that they're licensed to the quality code training to conduct that, and then they would be able to use the materials that we developed as well. So they may have other training available, and that's fine. It may be great training, but I'm just letting you know that they don't have to be licensed to train you, but they're not getting the materials that we're providing them. So we're offering this to our licensed training center. So tap into them. They're an excellent resource for you. They dive into the code. They speak to the manufacturer and to the site, and they can customize the training to meet your needs. So tap into those licensed training centers. At SQF, like I said, we have our own online training. So it's online training. Some folks can't go to a training center. They can't take the time or the money, or they don't have the resources to do that. So they can do online training, and SQF provides it as a resource. So we will be updating our implementing training and offering a new quality code training. So all of that will be available around September and be available on the SQF website. So if you go SQFI.com, you go under training centers, look at online training, or search for Alchemy. They're our training partner, and they would lead you right to where you need to go to get this information. And the last resource is what Sarah talked about earlier, and that's our SQF conference. So I hope to see you at our conference. It's November 7th through the 9th. It's at the Hyatt Regency in Dallas. So SQFI.com/SQF conference, I believe. I'm not sure. Anyways, if you go to SQFI.com/events, I know that events will lead you right to here. Sarah mentioned that registration will be open next Thursday, April 13th. But come to the conference. There will be sessions on these new code requirements: change management, equipment specifications, food fraud, allergens, EMP, all the stuff we talked about today. This is your resource to go to. So if you don't like any of those sessions, there's pre-conference training sessions that we'll be offering, and it gives you an opportunity to network with your peers and your food safety experts. Ask these questions. So implementation is January 2nd, and this gives you time to go there and find out what you need to know in the challenges that you face for implementing some of these things. So the best part about this conference is the energy that we get from all the participants. There's 800 food safety geeks there that are just wanting to share their knowledge and their information in order to make a safer supply chain. We all have one goal. We all want a safer supply chain. We know that one food safety incident is one too many, and it decreases consumer confidence regardless of what you manufacture. So we do want a safe supply chain, and we all have that as a common goal. We know that food safety is not a destination, that it's a journey. So I hope to see you all at the conference. I hope that we can discuss the new code requirements and create new solutions and make a safer supply chain. And so with that, I am going to take some questions if there are any. Christy, did anybody chat in any questions?
Yeah, one of the first ones is just to clarify, when will audits begin to Edition 8? So can I opt to have my audit to Edition 8 in July? Can I do that? When will audits to Edition 8 begin?
Well, first off, I love the attitude that somebody wants to just jump right into Edition 8. However, it will be January 2nd. So we are not providing an option to do that sooner. We need to have a start point, but you can certainly have a gap assessment done. We'll have checklists developed. You can work with your certification body, perhaps to do a gap assessment. So those checklists will be developed by July. and you would be able to work with your certification body to say, okay, if I was to be audited to Edition 8, how good would I be? You know, would I pass? Are there areas of opportunity? But January 2nd is the start date, but I certainly love that attitude.
Next question is, so I've got some distribution functions coming out of my site, or I may have a separate warehouse down the street. Do I need to be certified to the storage and distribution code for those like separate warehouses that I have just down the street? How does that all work?
Yep, that's a good question. So it depends how you want to include your scope of certification and that role of that storage and distribution facility. So if that storage and distribution facility is part of the manufacturing operations that you have, then it would be included in the scope of certification for your manufacturing audit if that's part of that role. If it's a separate storage and distribution facility that you want independently certified to the storage and distribution code, then you can certainly opt to have that separately certified. If you want to include it as part of the scope of certification, and that speaks to even blending audits, whether you have, like I talked about the farm to fork solution, and you have your manufacturing. The biggest one is dairy operations, and dairy operations often blow mold their own milk jugs. So it's food packaging as well as manufacturing. Now, if you're taking those food packaging materials, right, and you're selling them to somebody else, you can have that independently certified, all right? So if you're doing independent, if you're doing two separate roles and you want two separate certifications, then we would have one checklist for you that would combine those system elements and the PRPs together. So it really depends on your scope of certification. You may or may not, and if it's part of the continuous operation of your manufacturing facility, it would be included in your scope of certification, but it doesn't necessarily have to be under food distribution. It really depends on the role of that operation itself.
So for existing practitioners, food safety practitioners, what do they need to do moving towards Edition 8? Do they need to retake the training? Will they need to take a new exam? What do you need to do as a practitioner?
That's an excellent, such good questions. That's a good question. So in order to, one of the requirements of being an SQF practitioner is having knowledge of the code, and it's knowledge of the code you're being audited against. So that would be for those that are having audits after January 2nd or beyond, you would have to understand Edition 8. So to do that, you can take training. That's one way, but that's not a requirement. It does not state that in the code that training is a requirement. You have to have knowledge of the code. So we will be having independent videos and other webinars specific to the industry code. This is just a general overview, but we'll go over the specifics, and you can watch one of the videos that will be posted right to our website. So we'll have videos that are posted for the food manufacturing code or food manufacturing or food packaging that highlights what these differences are. So you can watch a video. You can go to your training center and get more information from them. You could read the code and understand what those differences are. There's lots of different ways to become familiar with the code. There's not a prescriptive way, but what the auditor will be asking is, these questions that are the changes, and see what type of code you're working off of, and that's what you have to be aware of.
So I'll be taking a lot of these questions and turning it into an FAQ document because there seem to be a lot of trends in terms of questions. I was answering the same questions over and over and over again. So I'll take these questions and turn it into an FAQ that we'll put on the website. Let's do one or two more questions, and then we'll let these people go free. One question is, what about the translations? When can we expect to see the code in, say, Spanish or French Canadian?
Oh, the translations, we are working on them right now. So we currently will be having translations available in Japanese, Chinese, Mandarin, French Canadian, and Spanish and English. So those are our 5 codes. And the expectation is 3 months from publication. So June 1st, right? March, April, May, June. July 1st is when we will be having those published to our website. So working on those right now. We will have them within 3 months. So I'm not sure, it could be sooner than that, but definitely within 3 months they'll be published.
One other thing is, yes, we will have those code change documents. The format that they will be in is there will be a change document for each code, and it'll have each part of the code. So there'll be a change document. So comparing 7.2 to 8.0, and then it'll list the change. So a lot of the elements did not change, but they may have been shuffled around. So what I'm doing is capturing that. So let's say for the manufacturing code, you'll see the changes listed for Part A, the system elements, and then each of the modules, and then the appendices, and then there'll be a change document for the primary code, a code change document for each of the quality code, each of the codes, and you'll start seeing those beginning Monday. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up. So same question for our auditors. What do our auditors need to do to be sure they are ready to conduct food safety audits starting January, or conduct SQF audits to Edition 8 starting in January?
Yes. So, what we will be hosting is webinars that addresses the changes, and specifically webinars for our auditors. They'll be recorded. They'll be posted to our website, and we will provide this information to them so that they can become familiar. The expectation is that the certification bodies ensure that their auditors receive proper training, and it could be our training. It could be training through their own environment. However, the expectation is that they will receive proper training, and we'll be working with our accreditation bodies to ask them how this has been conducted as part of their core assessment when they go in and do their accreditation audit to the certification bodies. So they will be required to follow those requirements. So we'll provide training and how that is monitored and reviewed to ensure that they have an understanding of it. Would be up to the certification bodies and their auditors that work for them. So yeah, we'll be providing training to the auditors regarding the changes, specifically not just the changes, but the interpretation and the intent behind the change. So, as I'm finally have an opportunity to go through all these questions that I've seen, and I know there's questions regarding the intent behind this, and that's what those individual training will provide, as well as the guidance documents. So our goal is to create videos for each of these industries codes, as well as that highlights just the changes, as well as the interpretation behind those changes. So I tried to cover some of those here today, and it's hard to do in an hour-and-a-half webinar for 7 different codes. So we'll be moving forward and providing that interpretation behind some of those questions that we get. So keep asking the questions. Like Christy said, we're going to certainly take all these questions, create an FAQ, and respond to those questions themselves. So a couple of the questions that I see at the end: registration for our conference for our upcoming SQF conference in Dallas, November 7th through the 9th. So that's the conference. Pre-conference training is, if it's a 2-day session, it begins on the 5th, so the 5th and the 6th. The 7th and the 9th is the conference. Registration is open April 13th. And why do you want to know that date? Because that's when you get the cheapest rate. early bird or the super early bird. I don't remember what we're calling it, but it's the early bird rate, and that's when you're going to get your cheapest rate. It doesn't get any cheaper than April 13th. So register April 13th before you forget, or before your boss changes their mind. So register and commit to attend the conference. I really want to see you all there. We can talk more about the code, the implementation. I can answer all your questions at the conference there. We had a question regarding internal audits. If you're auditing against Edition 8, all those, the code, implementation of the code is to Edition 8. So yes, management, responsibility, internal audits, review, etc., all do Edition 8. We want to see those there. Actually, I don't know the rate to attend the conference. I know it's less than 1,000. I don't know the early bird rate. They actually pay my way to go there simply because I work for them. And I think there was one more question regarding pet food and feed. So more information on resources for allergens of pet food. Roxanna, I'm not quite sure. My advice would go to the association. It's called the Animal Feed Association. So you can AFIA and Animal Feed Industry Association, and they have a lot of information regarding FSMA, animal food, and pet foods. So that's where you can go. Any other questions, Christy?
Yeah, no, actually, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I did want to point out just one more time that you will get the PDF of these slides and a link to the recording of this webinar next week. So I believe it's on the 11th or the 12th, so don't ask for it tomorrow. Don't ask for it on Monday. You will get a link to this webinar, and it will be available on our YouTube channel next week. So, yes, you will get that. And let's go ahead and wrap this up.
All righty. I don't have anything else to say. Sarah, are we good?
No, I think we're all good here. Just like Christy said, this will all be available to you next week. It'll also be up on our website, so check back then. Any other questions, feel free to email info@sqfi.com. And thanks again, everyone, for attending our webinar. We're very excited about our new Edition 8.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.